Before I call the Prime Minister, I would like to mark the fact that this is the last time the Right Honourable Member for Richmond and Northallerton will appear at the dispatch box during PMQs. There's a bit more to do afterwards, but he has spoken at this dispatch box as Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, and after today, we all look forward to his continued contributions from the backbenches. We wish him and his family well in the future endeavours. And I say personally, thank you for a working relationship. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. I call Katrina Murray.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish everyone celebrating in the UK and around the world a joyful Diwali, a time to come together to celebrate and focus on a brighter future. Last Diwali, the Leader of the Opposition and his family lit the deers outside 10 Downing Street. It was a significant moment in our national story. The first British Asian Prime Minister is a reminder that this is a country where people of every background can fulfil their dreams, and it makes us all proud to be British. Mr. Speaker, as you've just referenced, as this is our last exchange across the dispatch boxes, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the Leader of the Opposition for his service. Now, of course, we've had political disagreements, ideological differences. We've argued at some length. But I want to thank him for his hard work, for his commitment, and for his decency in everything that he has done. And I too wish him and his family the very best for whatever the future may hold for them. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Katrina Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to associate myself with the remarks made by the Prime Minister. Cumbernauld in my constituency was promised an elective and diagnostic treatment centre by the Scottish Government in 2021. This has continued to be delayed and is now alleged to be mothballed. What assurances can the Prime Minister give me that any Barney consequentials from today's budget are used to benefit my constituents and not be held on to by the Scottish Government?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for her question. I am sorry to hear about the delays affecting her constituents. The party opposite oversaw years of mismanagement and chaos, and the impact on Scottish NHS is evident. This Labour government is committed to delivering for the Scottish people, including making sure that we have an NHS fit for the future. The Chancellor will set out details in just a few moments.
Leader of the Opposition, Rishi Sunak.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for your kind words, and indeed thank you to the Prime Minister for his kind words. Indeed, no Prime Minister looks forward to PMQs, but I always did like this pre-budget one, because it was, for a change, nice not to be the main event and just the warm-up act. But as you said, Mr. Speaker, today is my last appearance at PMQs, and I'm happy to confirm reports that I will now be spending more time in the greatest place on earth, where the scenery is worthy. The scenery is indeed worthy of a movie set, and everyone is a character. That's right, Mr. Speaker. If anyone needs me, I will be in Yorkshire. So, and as an adopted Yorkshireman, I'm particularly looking forward to doing the coast-to-coast walk that runs through my constituency and many others. Since 2015, we've made significant progress with a campaign to make it a national trail, and indeed, Natural England are close to concluding their work. So, can I ask the Prime Minister to ensure that the coast-to-coast does indeed become Britain's greatest national trail, and in preparation for my return to the backbenches, would he meet with me to discuss it?
Mr. Speaker, I thought he was about to ask me to join him on the walk. But certainly, I will meet him, and it is an important point.
Mr. Speaker, that is very kind of the Prime Minister. I know he's... I know he's partial to the Lake District, but perhaps we can tempt him over to our end as well. Now, Yorkshire is not just famous for its walks, but also for being home to some of England's greatest cricketers. Now, sadly, no one's going to put me on that list, Mr. Speaker, but who knows? I've got a lot more time to practice now. So, but cricket does have the power to bring people together from all communities and give them fantastic opportunities, as shown so powerfully by Andrew Flintoff's recent documentary. Yeah. Now, we also lead the world in female participation, and that will stand us in good stead when we host the Women's World Cup in 2026 and when cricket becomes an Olympic sport in 2028. So could I therefore ask the Prime Minister to continue government support for the England and Wales Cricket Board's new initiative to get cricket into vastly more state schools, fostering a whole new generation of cricketers for us all to cheer on at every level?
Yes, is the answer to that question. And the point is a really important one. We celebrate cricket, it does bring communities together, but it's also really important for children and young people to enjoy sport, lots of different sports, because it gives them a confidence that they might not otherwise have. It gives them the ability to work in a team and teaches them about skills like leadership. So I'm fully supportive.
Rishi.
Now, our two predecessors, Sir Tony Blair and Lord Hague, have repeatedly come together and powerfully argued in their joint reports that it is vital for the future prosperity of Britain's economy, society and public services for us to be a world leader in technology and innovation. Now, the Prime Minister and I may not yet be at our joint report writing stage yet, but in a similar spirit of cross-party agreement, could I ask him to find his inner tech bro and continue to support emerging British tech businesses and establish our country as the home of AI growth and innovation?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and this is a really important point. The Leader of the Opposition held a summit last year on AI, which was very important. We have been bringing together the leaders in AI. We have a huge advantage in this country, being ranked in the top 3 in the world. AI is going to have huge potential for our growth, for our public services, and I think the whole House should be fully supportive of this.
Prime Minister.
The Prime Minister has the immense privilege The Prime Minister has the immense privilege of being the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, Northern Ireland is a special part of our union, but one that needs particular care, attention and respect. Having a strong functioning assembly at Stormont is good for the people of Northern Ireland and good for our union. And that's why I was so pleased to see government restored there earlier this year, and I'm grateful to him for his support with that. So can he assure the House that he will continue to work to keep Stormont open, delivering for the Northern Irish people and strengthening Northern Ireland's place in our union?
Prime Minister.
Yes, and again, this is a really important point and one that matters to me personally. I worked for 5 years in Northern Ireland on some of the proposals under the Good Friday Agreement, in particular the transformation of the RUC into the Police Service of Northern Ireland. I worked with both communities there. It was for 5 years. It was very important to me, had a huge impact on me, and so I care deeply about Northern Ireland, and I absolutely agree that the institutions government needs to be up and running and want to give all support I can to the further development in Northern Ireland.
Richard.
Now, as Prime Minister, he will be acutely aware of the threats that our United Kingdom faces from an axis of authoritarian states, Iran, North Korea, Russia and China. And in particular, I'm proud of the way that this House has united in standing up to Russian aggression in Ukraine. And I know that we will never waver in our commitment to the Ukrainian cause. Now, I will always be grateful for the support that he gave me when we were the first country to send Ukraine Western battle tanks, long-range missiles, and the first to offer security assurances to Kyiv. So in light of the threats that we face, can I urge him to always maintain the strength of the transatlantic alliance and ensure that NATO remains the bedrock of Western security, with the United Kingdom playing a leading role?
Yes, and NATO is, in my view, as important today as the day in which it was created, in light of the challenges that we face. And it was a Labour government that was the proud co-founder of NATO, and we've repeatedly said we support NATO to the hilt.
Rishi Sunak.
Well, finally, Mr. Speaker, Tomorrow is Diwali, and I became leader of my party during Diwali, and I now stand down during that same festival. So I'm proud to have been the first British Asian Prime Minister, but I was even prouder that it was not that big a deal. And that speaks volumes about the values of the British people, of our country, and of this Parliament. So will the Prime Minister join me in applauding the kindness, decency and tolerance that has always been the British way?
Yes, and I meant what I said when I said that we were all proud to see him standing there as Prime Minister, representing our diverse country. We were all proud. I think everybody in this House was. So I thank him for that. And his last question, final question as Leader of the Opposition, although judging by the speed with which his party goes through leaders, he may be back here before too long. But in the meantime, I'm sure he'll be a great champion for the people of Richmond. But, Mr. Speaker, finally, I'm sure he won't mind me disclosing to the House the contents of a letter that he wrote to me this week. My answer to it is clear. Yes, I will arrange for him to meet the relevant minister about the A66 that runs through his constituency.
Dave Beghillier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in Hackney, nearly 4,000 children who could fill 8 primary schools are in temporary accommodation, many outside London. This is bad for their future opportunities. It's ripping apart our communities. I welcome the government's pledge to build new homes, but will he ensure that those who cannot have a roof over their head are a top priority in that long queue for new housing?
Prime Minister.
I thank you for raising this issue. It is a source of national shame that there are just under 1.3 million households on a social housing waiting list, including, I think, 8,000 of them in Hackney. The best way to tackle overcrowding and meet housing need is to build the homes this country needs, and that's why we will deliver the 1.5 million homes over this Parliament, and the Chancellor will set out further details in just a moment.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with your remarks and the remarks of the Prime Minister about the right honourable gentleman, the member for Richmond and Northallerton, and thank him for his service and wish him and the whole country a happy Diwali. Despite our political differences, I've always felt a certain kinship since the general election, when he was the only other party leader to get as wet as I did. I'm looking forward to debating the budgets with him and the Chancellor shortly, but can I wish him and his family all the best for the future. Mr. Speaker, next month's summit in Baku is a chance for the UK to regain world leadership on climate change, a role disastrously lost under the Conservatives. As this is the final summit before countries must ratchet up their new Paris agreements before 2035, will the Prime Minister take this opportunity to seize back world leadership on climate change by committing today to support the targets set out this week by the Independent Climate Change Committee and publish a programme to deliver on those?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will seize that initiative. We've reset on the international stage, and climate is one of the biggest challenges that we face. I will be going to the conference this year, as I went, in fact, last year, as Leader of the Opposition, to continue those discussions about how we reach the very important targets that we must reach.
Shred David.
I thank the Prime Minister for his reply. I hope we can really take that world leadership back again. Another issue which the UK needs to show urgent leadership on is the escalating war in Sudan. Tens of thousands of people have been killed. 11 million Sudanese have had to flee from their homes, Mr. Speaker. The reports of mass killings and horrifying sexual violence against women are truly stomach-churning. So when the UK takes over presidency of the UN Security Council this Friday, will the Prime Minister make it a priority to secure a new resolution on preventing future atrocities, including a no-fly zone to stop the Iranian drones?
Prime Prime Minister.
Well, I thank him for raising this because it is an important issue, and I don't think we discuss it enough in this House. We continue to see mounting evidence of appalling atrocities against civilians and unacceptable restrictions on humanitarian access, and working with international partners, including as penholder, as he knows, at the UN Security Council to end the violence, secure humanitarian access and ensure the protection of civilians is a major priority.
Rachel Baskin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is this Labour government in setting up a child poverty task force which is determined to move 4.3 million children in poverty today into a better future. However, we also inherited 2.1 million older people in poverty. So will my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, agree to setting up a pensioner poverty task force so that older people don't have to worry about paying for their housing, food and heating costs, and ensure that they have dignity in later life?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the scale of poverty that we inherited in this country is truly appalling, with over 4 million children now growing up in low-income families. We'll deliver on our manifesto commitment to tackle child poverty, as we did last time in government, and we'll publish our strategy in the spring.
Colin Denny.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The ICJ has mandated that Israel ensures access to life-saving aid in Gaza under Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, yet the Israeli government has voted to effectively block its delivery. As a human rights lawyer, does the Prime Minister agree that banning UNRWA is a breach of international law? And how much more evidence does he need before calling out what is happening as a genocide and acting in line with the UK's responsibilities as a signatory of the Genocide Convention?
I'm very worried and concerned about the decision that's just been taken by the Parliament in relation to UNRWA. There's a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, and that decision will only make it much worse, which is why I've expressed my concern about it already before today and will continue to do so. It needs to be reversed. It needs to be reversed very, very quickly indeed. I have never described what's going on in Gaza as genocide. I do agree that all sides should comply with international law.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last month, a Scottish Government Health Minister was forced to apologise for waiting times in my area of Fife, where some patients wait more than 2 years for treatment. My constituents deserve so much better than this. Does the Prime Minister agree that the SNP must take responsibility for 17 years of failure? And if today's budget delivers a bigger block grant to Scotland, they must sort out the mess they have made of Scotland's precious NHS.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this is the second time this has come up this afternoon in Prime Minister's questions. I hope the SNP are listening good and hard, because I'm sorry to hear her constituents have been waiting so many years for their medical treatment that they need. We are committed to the NHS, and the Chancellor will have a lot more to say about that in just a moment.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's own independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, Jonathan Hall-Casey, has said repeatedly recently that it is important in incidents of terrorism that the authorities put out more information sooner in order to prevent an information gap. Does the Prime Minister agree?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously I'll tread carefully in answering this question for the very reasons that you yourself set out at the beginning of this session. I think it's very important, first and foremost, that in all cases, including the particularly difficult case that the Speaker mentioned earlier, that the police and prosecutors are able to do their difficult job. And all of us in this House have a choice to make, including both candidates to be the next Tory leader. They can either support the police in their difficult task, or they can undermine the police in their difficult task. And I know which side I'm on.
Rachel Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minutes from here, in the communities of Victoria, Pimlico, Paddington and Covent Garden, there is an unprecedented rise in the number of people sleeping rough after 14 years of the Tory government. Will the Prime Minister update this House on the cross-departmental homelessness strategy? And does he agree with me that this Labour government has a once-in-a-generation opportunity to end rough sleeping for good?
Prime Minister.
Homelessness levels are far too high in this country. And we are developing a long-term strategy, working with mayors and local leaders to end homelessness once and for all. And taking action to tackle the root causes, Mr. Speaker, which is delivering the biggest increase in social and affordable house building in a generation. And we, of course, have picked up where the party opposite failed by abolishing no-fault evictions, preventing many renters ending up homeless.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, we had the embarrassment of the Labour Party being sued by the Trump campaign. Then we had the national capitulation of...
Let me hear the rest of the question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then we had the national capitulation of the government over the sovereignty of the Chagos Island. And now we have had the personal humiliation of the Prime Minister at the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit. All of which begs the question, Mr. Speaker, how on earth does a Foreign Secretary still have the full confidence of the Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I was intending to say that he was an upgrade on his predecessor. Of course, drove up thousands of pounds in mortgages, but I withdraw that now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When the Prime Minister and the Chancellor discuss the importance of supporting working families, I think of the dedicated farmers in South Norfolk. The Prime Minister has constantly acknowledged the critical role of food security and the need for farmers to have certainty to plan. Can the Prime Minister confirm what action our government will be taking to back British farming in constituencies like mine?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I welcome my honourable friend to his place. And talking of predecessors, no one did more damage to rural constituencies than his nearby predecessor, whose disastrous mini-budget crashed the economy and hurt his constituents. I do note that she's been tweeting the approval of the current Shadow Chancellor's attacks on the independent OBR, just showing the party opposite have learned absolutely nothing. Over 1,000 farms have been forced out of business due to Tory neglect, and we will turn that around, and you'll hear more about that in the budget in just a minute.
Helen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Robert Jones and Agnes Hunt Hospital in Oswestry in my constituency is home to the Veterans Orthopaedic Service, and that's by far the largest provider of veterans hospital care in the country. It's a fine example of what you can build when the NHS and the local authority work together. It costs no extra public money to set it up, but because of NHS changes in the way ICBs charge each other, it's been left with a funding shortfall. Will the Prime Minister come and visit this fantastic facility in beautiful North Shropshire and see for himself why it's so important we keep it going?
I thank the honourable member for raising that issue, and we're all grateful to our veterans for their service in protecting our country. I do understand the value of the centre that she references and the support that it provides for veterans, and we are committed to ensuring veterans receive the employment, the mental health and the housing support that they need. The upcoming budget will set out the changes that we'll be making. Thank you.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of failure by the last government to renew and grow the UK's infrastructure, does the Prime Minister agree with me that additional investment is needed to kickstart economic growth? And that Mr. Speaker, this is the important bit. And that investing in a new Lower Thames crossing to relieve Dartford residents from gridlock caused by overcapacity at the Dartford crossing, thereby boosting the North Kent and UK economy by £40 billion would be an excellent project to start with.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm really pleased that under this government, Britain has already secured £63 billion worth of investment, which will be measured in tens of thousands of jobs. Our number one mission is growth. You'll be hearing a lot more about that in just a few minutes' time.
David Bandel.
My constituents, Colin and Mandy Mackey's 18-year-old son, Greg, died as a result of having a soft drink spiked shortly after he went to college. They welcome the fact that this government is going to continue with the legislation proposed by the previous government. But can the Prime Minister assure them that they and other campaigners will work with ministers and officials, not only in bringing forward that legislation, but to ensure that awareness is raised of this abhorrent practice and its potentially fatal consequences?
Prime Minister. Can I thank the Right Honourable Member for raising that tragic case, and I join him in paying tribute to Greg's parents. Their tireless work to raise awareness of spiking, to support victims and call for changes in the law is inspiring, given what they've been through. This government will act. We will make spiking a specific criminal offence to better protect victims and support the police in tackling these crimes. Thank you.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Farnborough, our leisure centre was knocked down by the Conservative Council, who made empty promises to replace it with an expensive civic hub with no viable plan to pay for it. Will the Prime Minister help secure the funding that Rushmore Council needs to rebuild our leisure centre so that Labour can start delivering change after years of Tory failure?
Prime Minister.
Can I welcome my honourable friend to her place? I think she's the first Labour MP for Aldershot ever. And she's doing a superb job for her constituents. Rushmore Borough Council was left with a shortfall of over £19 million over the last 4 years. And the running down of local services has been one of the most painful features of the last 14 years. We will work hand in hand with councils, including multi-year funding settlements, and with local leaders to develop and make sure the services that are needed are there.
Final question, Mark Francois.
Thank you, sir. Prime Minister, you mentioned veterans a few minutes ago. As we approach Remembrance Tide, one group of veterans we all owe a great debt to are those who served during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Hundreds were killed. Thousands were maimed by both Republican and so-called Loyalist bombs. Many of those veterans now in the autumn of their lives. And yet you're proposing to repeal the Northern Ireland Legacy Bill, which was designed in part to protect them from endless investigation and reinvestigation. Why, sir, are you throwing those veterans to the wolves to pander to Sinn Féin?
Can I just say, the honourable member's been here for a long time. You is not me. I don't want it to be me. Please, Prime Minister.
I'm not.
Good luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you.